I am completely obsessed with reading the money sections of newspaper websites. And one of the things that I see come up again and again on there is people in the top 10% of earners complaining that they are living hand to mouth. It's easy to be dismissive of someone who's on six figures but complains that their finances are a mess, they can't afford to send their kids to private school, the mortgage on their 4-bed London townhouse means that they can't afford to shop at Waitrose. But instead of rolling our eyes and being dismissive of it, I actually think that there's a lot that we can learn from high earners who say that they're living paycheck to paycheck. How wealthy you actually are and how much you worry about money isn't just about how much you earn. It's also about your money mindset and your approach to personal finances. It's not about what you make. It's about what you don't spend. In this video, I'm going to look at why a high earner may find themselves living paycheck to paycheck and what we, regardless of what you earn, can actually learn from that. First of all, great expectations. As earnings increase, there tends to be a pressure on your spending caused by what your expectations of what a successful life actually looks like. Someone on 30k a year has a vision of what life will look like once they're on 50, 80k a year or even more. And just to add, there are definitely practical forces at play here that are beyond a high earner's control. One is that a higher earner will likely move at some point into a higher tax bracket, and that may mean that they lose certain benefits or certain tax breaks, such as help with childcare. And childcare with very young children in the UK is super expensive. And then there's the fact that most high-paying jobs tend to be based in places that are really expensive to live, like London or New York. And you definitely pay the price for this. This FT report found that Londoners' high salaries relative to the rest of the country are consumed by higher housing costs. Those extra earnings are just swallowed up by what they're having to spend on their housing. What we can learn from this is to be really, really clear about what really matters to us. We as a society have become really obsessed with constantly striving for things that are materially better. And that just means that no amount of money can ever be enough. In fact, studies have shown that as people's salaries increased, they didn't necessarily get any happier. They always had an idea in their head of what the ideal salary would be. And that ideal salary was always more than what they were currently on now, even for people in the top 10% of earners. To break free of this, we can focus on what is actually enough for us and be realistic about what things cost. Any salary is finite, so even a high salary will require some budgeting to ensure that you live below your means. The second reason is lifestyle creep. In order to match those great expectations of their lifestyle, people will spend more as they earn more, and that just erodes any gains that they've made as their salary is increased. When they get that pay rise, they will upgrade the high ticket items in their life. So better house, better car, more expensive holidays, and maybe even more frequent holidays. And new smaller ticket items tend to creep in along the way as well. So the latest gadget, brand new clothes on a more regular basis, shopping at more expensive places for new clothes and home decor. And that lifestyle creep is heavily influenced by our social circles and the people that we work with. If you are surrounded by the top 10%, you will spend like the top 10%. And a big problem with that for high earners is that there is a huge discrepancy between the person or the people at the bottom of the top 10% and the people way at the top, the billionaires. In fact, at the bottom of the top 10%, you're closer to the average salary than you are to the super, super rich. There's also an expectation among many high earners of being able to send their kids to private school. This is hugely topical right now because the Labour government, if they get in at the next election, and it looks like they will, are set to add 20% VAT onto private school fees. And you've got a lot of parents, high earning parents, such as doctors and lawyers, saying that if this is done, they won't be able to afford the private school fees anymore. And the thing that I always think when I read this is that when a high earner goes over budget, it's never about just one expense. It's gonna be a multitude of different expenses. It's gonna be the house, the car, the lifestyle, the holidays. What can we, regardless of what we earn, take away from that? It's really important, regardless of what you earn, to approach every area of spending in your life with a frugal mind. Prioritize the things that really matter and seek out best value at every turn. And spend mindfully rather than trying to impress people. Stretching yourself so thin that you're on the verge of going over budget every single month almost guarantees that at some point you actually will. But even if you don't, Is the stress of feeling like money is so tight that you feel stretched unmanageably thin really worth it? Number 3 is trying to look rich. It's one thing to look rich. It's quite another thing to actually be wealthy. When people strive to look rich, they spend more, and that leaves less room in their budget for creating wealth for the future. When someone has an incredible house in a beautiful area and a really fancy car, that tells us absolutely nothing about that wealth. All that tells us about is the money that they have spent, which is now money that they no longer have. You may be asking, why bother building wealth? Why not spend what you have today and be merry? And the reason is that the one thing that you can expect in the future is the unexpected. The next challenge is always right around the corner. The last few years have definitely taught us that. And while a person may have a high salary now, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're equipped to handle those challenges in the future. And the trouble with being in a habit of spending to look rich is that you're likely to see that pressure to keep up with the Joneses continually increase. It is highly unlikely that you will ever out-earn a spending problem. To avoid this eating into your wealth prospects, it can be a really good idea to set a proportion of your salary towards savings rather than sticking with a set amount regardless of how your salary changes. So for example, say you commit to setting aside 20% of your salary, whatever you bring in, towards savings. Another reason a high earner may feel stressed out over their financial situation is the pressures on their time. Someone who is spending to look rich and falling victim to lifestyle creep is likely to feel that they need to work harder in order to keep that money coming in so they can keep up with those bills. And that is going to cost them precious time. But a frugal person will stick to a budget and save more, meaning that while they have less stuff to show for it, they are setting money aside and building wealth every single month. And because their money is making money for them, they can work less and spend more time on the things that they really enjoy and more time with the people that they love. And the final reason why a high earner may find themselves living paycheck to paycheck is that they don't see the long game. Oftentimes when I read about these people who are really struggling on a high salary, they have very much a live for today attitude towards their spending rather than a save for tomorrow attitude. What that can mean is that someone living a luxe lifestyle on a high salary for 20 years may have far less wealth to show for it than someone on a much lower salary who spent the last 20 years quietly saving. A rich person buys stuff, a wealthy person has assets. Let me give you an example of how that can play out. An individual on a take-home salary of 6k a month has 5.5k of expenses, leaving them with £500 to save or invest. Another person who lives a more frugal life looks on paper to be poorer and certainly doesn't look wealthy to look at the house that they live in and the car that they drive. But on 3k a month, they have expenses of 1.5k, but save the remaining 50% of their income. What that means is that in just 10 years' time, assuming a 5% return, the gulf between these two individuals will be clear. Because the first person is going to have 77k, whereas the second will have £233,000. The key with building wealth and ultimately achieving financial freedom is playing that long game. Consistency is really key. The ultimate lesson that I have taken away from reading about these high earners who are struggling to survive is to make budgeting and getting value for money a habit. It doesn't have to be boring. It's not about giving up all fun. It's about moderation and prioritizing. It's about spending intentionally so that you spend on the stuff you love without forgetting about your financial future. Thank you so much for watching. You have a fantastic day.